Hello. I'm audible, right? Yep, thanks. And sorry for the delay. I don't know, something didn't work in the MacBook, so we are back to the Windows PC right now. So I'm actually going to talk about backend for Android engineers. Apparently, I'm an Android engineer, but sometimes in my free time, I have to do backend engineering because I can't ask a friend to do it for me. So before starting, I have to give a bit of a hint. Who am I? So I'm an Android engineer at Clue. It's a startup based in Berlin. I'm also a Google developer expert for Android and recently got inducted for Kotlin. Before that, to give you a basic idea what we do at Clue, it's a women period tracking app. Basically, it tackles all the health cycles about a woman. Now, I'm going to go a bit fast so that I have a lot of slides to tackle. The next, we have a basic agenda which we are going to cover. First, we have to go through the introduction, why we think, and personally, I think Kotlin is a good choice to start for backend engineering. About that, what are the different options if you have to choose Kotlin as a backend option? Among that, I'm actually choosing Ktor, which is backed by the company itself who built Kotlin. It's Ktor, and the benefits of it. So let's just get into it. First, introduction. How many of you are actually using Kotlin? It can be backend, right? For Android, I've specifically used Java as well. So we are still using Java in a bit, so in the process of migration. And how many of you are using backend for it? Right, so I hope after this talk, at least some of the folks can increase their hands and start using Kotlin for backend as well. Right, so the reason why I chose Kotlin is because these are the topics mentioned in their website. It's very expressive, it's scalable, the migration is possible from Java to Kotlin. You have the tooling support. The best reason I have to talk about tooling is because as Android developers, our IDE is built by JetBrains. It is marketed by Google as an Android studio, but it is built and only built by JetBrains, right? Now we have IntelliJ ideas. We have a lot of tooling support for that. The community support is the best I have seen for Kotlin. So hands down, that's the best one we have. And the ease of learning for us as an Android developer is the best, because since we are using it for years in Android engineering, we can use it or just pick it up for backend, right? That's the basic benefits why we use Kotlin. Now, I'll just go for the frameworks we have. We have Ktor, which I am going to talk about. There's a very famous framework, Spring Boot, which has by default integration for Kotlin nowadays. We have Vertex, we have Micronauts, and a lot more I can't even know about. Like, there are n number of community libraries and frameworks which are there now. Specifically, I am going to talk about Ktor. Now, why specific to Ktor? We are using Kotlin. That's a part of JetBrains. Ktor is built by JetBrains. So the reasons are actually listed out. It's very lightweighted. One of the best reasons is it's open sourced. The coroutine support we have, which we love to do it, and we are migrating as well as from RX, a lot of people do. Ktor is built on top of this whole coroutine thing. This is backed by the company itself, JetBrains, and scalable to the infinity, but somehow my infinity is on the top. I don't know why, but it is scalable to at its max position. You can scale it as much as you want. Now, this was the whole intro thing we wanted to cover for whatever the Ktor can do. There's a very real case or the use case symbol or the tutorials which I have covered for this. Now, if I have to start a project right now, there are two ways to do it. The first way, you have a website called start.ktor, where you can actually select whatever you want, the configuration, the name, and you can just start using it. When you press the next button, there you have the same system what you use for Android Studio. So I'm basically trying to cover what Android engineers do in your day-to-day life, not creating a project every day for sure, but we use the same process of creating a project in Ktor as well. We have the website we want to host on. Let's say for us, it would be maybe helloclue.com. Artifact is same as the application ID we have. It can be unique, it cannot be unique, it's up to you, but generally, we try to keep it unique, so maybe com.services.helloclue or something, whatever you want to. The version we want to go to, it's 1.6.4, the current one we are working with. The engine, it's the server engine which drives the whole Ktor thing. We have netty, we have CIO, we have jetty. But as a default one, I always use netty, and it's also recommended that if you don't know other engines, just select the default options. And this is the configuration or the code, where it tells you which file and which function to call to initialize your backend server. This is when you use start.ktor.io. The second thing, we always use IntelliJ for some sort of projects. You can use IntelliJ for Android as well. So I basically use IntelliJ for my Android, for my side projects as well, because this is the one thing which handles everything for me. It has a plugin called Ktor. You can install it, and if you are on the premium version of it, Ktor has the by default plugin installed there. You can use the same thing. Now, in this, when you have actually created from the IntelliJ thing, or you have created from start.ktor.io, there are a couple of things which has called plugins, or the features which were initially called. So when you design something in Android, what you basically do is, you don't start writing your networking libraries, right? Or does anybody write it now? Is there anybody who's written their own networking library by any chance? Or everybody uses retrofit or volley, right? So Ktor out of the box gives you n number of plugins, OAuth authentication, your JWT authentication and stuff, right? You can select by default ones you need for your project, and you can just create it, right? This is the sample when you start creating with IntelliJ. And these are the same questions which has been asked in your start.ktor.io. And this, all details, you can fill it up. Here, one more thing, if you want to see, there's a build system. I'm not explaining that because this is very much similar to how we have it in Gradle. You can use the KTS version of it, you can use the Gradle version of it, or even Maven. I have never tried Maven though, but it works, apparently. Now, it's same as Android Studio again. You press the play button, or you run it via the Gradle, and you see this. This is the by default screen when you create a project, either it be, again, from the website or the plugin. This is what you see when you are done. Now, I just gave you a basic example or the run-through how it happens or how you can create a project. Now, this is a file which gets created when you initialize your project or you create via your IDE. This is inside the application class. Now, as a very generic engineers, we see this main function which runs the first time. Now, if you can see there, there's an embedded server which generates the server for the Ktor to run. It takes the netty engine to it. You know the port which has to be run through, and the host is already there. It is 0.0.0. So if you go to the previous slide, you see that we are running it on 0.0.0, and the port is 80 and 80. It's the same thing which has to be mentioned in the embedded server, and there you pass the configurations to it, and you just start the server. Now, routing is basically a type of a plugin, which I explained, which we have to do when you create a project. So routing is something which is by default selected while creating a project, because for sure, if we are creating a backend, we are definitely going to create n number of REST APIs, at least couple of few, right? Configure routing actually handles that. Configure routing is something which works to create a route. So now, breaking it down into multiple aspects, embedded server, as I said, creates a server for your netty engine or whatever engine you have selected. So here, this creates a server. This handles all your route. Now, there are different ways if you want to handle your routes, but this is one of them. Now, let's understand the routing first. So configure routing, which you saw in the last slide, was actually an extension function, which is, again, one of the benefits of using it as an extension function or using Kotlin, for example. Here, routing, which we are using as a DSL, is actually installing your plugin here by default. And there, we have this get call. So if you see this configure routing, and if I navigate back here, it's being used here itself, because this is a part of an application class or the application pipeline which we have in our project. So this extension function configures itself in the router, and here we have that function which is being defined. Now, this routing actually installs your plugin routing, which handles all your get call, post call, and whatever HTTP verbs we have. Now, call.respond text. Call is also a parameter which is being found in the routing, or the HTTP verb in get. When you use this call, you can actually decide what to use and when to use to show to the user what they want. Generally, as a use case, we do two primary things. Either we display a JSON, which is consumed by the client side, web or iOS or Android, or we just somehow display a content on the website, which is called the server-driven UI, right? Or rendering a template. Here, we are only just showing a response text because we just want to show an hello world, and this is a default one which has been created. Now, this get, we have used n number of times in Android where we have to get something as a query parameter path, anything in retrofit, and there are post, there is patch, and there's delete put, right? So just to give you a very generic overview, generally in a normal use case, when you create a backend server or if you work on a client side, you use these 5 things majority of the time: get, post, delete, put, and patch. Get, we generally use if we want to fetch something from the backend end. And I'm talking right now on the basis of a client engineer. So when we use a get call, we want to get something from the backend. When we want to create a user, create an entry or something which we want to create, we use post. Delete is the obvious thing if you want to remove something. And put and patch is something to update. Now, if we are creating that same thing in the Ktor file, let's say in the configure routing extension function, this is how we are going to do. In the get call, you would actually get the path which you want to pass. For me, there is no path right now. So if I'm going to use this in a retrofit thing, the path after the base URL would be nothing. It would be just a slash. So now a slash path is actually giving me 4 different types of HTTP verbs or HTTP calls which I can perform. For here, it was get, post, delete, and put, which I have done. Now, this was about routing, and we gave an extension how you can create your custom routes. Now let's talk about the plugin thing. As I mentioned, it's a pre-coded package to help you ship or build faster. This you can consider. It can be a library which we are using in Android, for example, any open source library. Retrofit, for example, it's a plugin if you talk in the terms of Ktor. Volley, even Jetpack Compose, which is not by default built in an application. And if you want to use it, you just maybe just integrate it in your Gradle, import it, and just start working with it. It's the same thing what we call as plugin. Now, check this extension function I have created. It's, again, an extension function called dummy plugin of an application. Here, we use install keyword. If you can see this difference with the routing one, we didn't have installed routing anywhere, because routing is installed by default in this Ktor project. But let's say if you want to serialize something, what would you use? What is that? Jackson or something, right? You can use here as well. The same thing. You have to use install. As a parameter, you can just pass whatever you want, JSON or something, right? And the second thing, you can just import that in configure routing, how we were using it, in embedded server, how we were using the configure routing. And you can just integrate that plugin and start using it. So for example, here is an example of how we use JSON as a content negotiator. So we use content negotiation for a purpose that we can render, let's say, a JSON data which is being fired by the client side, and we want to handle it on the backend side. But on the backend end, we are not going to just pick up the JSON and we can start using it. We need to serialize, as we do in our application as well, with JSON or maybe with Jackson. Here, content negotiation, we are installing it. There are 3 popular options which you can actually use. It's JSON, it's Jackson, and there is a Kotlin serialization. Now, this is also a plugin which we are installing, let's say for JSON here, and we are going to use it. Now, this was how you can use a plugin, how you can create a route. But that was more of a tutorial thing which you can see, but there is a real-world example which we daily use. So let's say I'm creating a user, which is always a generic part, where we always, what do you do when you create a user? You create a data class. You enter some data to it, let's say name, age, and last name or something. You take that. You pass it on the server side by serializing it to a JSON, right? That's how we basically do it, correct? Am I wrong or correct? Or we had some extra lunch today? OK, so this is how we configure it. We create a route, let's say create user. We take it call.receive, right? This one. When we use call.receive, what it basically does it has a same data class on the client side. It has a same data class on the backend side. What it does whenever you pass that data class as a JSON, you pick it up and you give it to the backend. It would take that same JSON content, it would map it with the data class you have, and it receives as a user object whatever you have passed. Now, this is a very basic example. This is a JSON which I am passing, name Himanshu, age 26, and job at Clue. The data class in this end, which we are using it here, receive, right? This is that data class which would be receiving here. And now, to access it, we can just use user.name, for example, here in call.respond. And this would respond that whole user as a JSON, which we have it right now. So here we are not using call.respond text. Rather, we are using call.respond. So when you actually use call.respond, you are actually passing whole data as a concrete form and not in a specific type, saying that we want it as a text, we want it as a string, or something else. We are just passing whatever data we have, and we are passing it in the JSON end. That's what call.respond is doing for us. In the same case, if I'm not wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in Android application, whenever, let's say, we are creating an user object, with this specific parameters, Himanshu, age, and let's say the job, we have the same type of data class, correct? Yes? That's the same thing what we have to do in the Ktor end as well. When we receive a JSON, we just take it and do it in this way. Now, have you ever Googled this out in the recent past days? Just go to Google and search for DroidCon Berlin, maybe for the address, for the schedule, or something. A lot of people might have done it, right? I think you guys have had too much lunch today. But OK, I have done it for sure. So if you see this, what we see here is a query parameter, right? This is a very generic use case when you use q is equal to whatever search thing you have passed. Google obviously has a lot more data after it, maybe from the source you came from and whatever. But this is that whole main thing which we want to care about. Now, when you use a retrofit call, you actually build that whole function, right? @query, you pass the name of that variable, and then you pass the data you want to pass, correct? That's the same thing which we want to do. So for example, if we are doing an API call where we are getting something, maybe a paginated call, there we want to pass the page number. So for now, in this case, we don't have a page number. What we have is q and the data for it. So how can we handle the same use case in Ktor? So what I'm trying to say is, consider we have to build a paginated version of something in Ktor. You can consume it for sure, but how you can do it in the Ktor server side? So when you do a create a get call or something, let's say Google has this /search. Here, you want to get this q as a parameter, which we want to achieve something, right? So here as well, we are using call.request.query parameters. We want to get the query parameters. Technically, query parameters returns you a map. And in that map, we have all the keys which we want to have. So for now, in our example, we have q, and it's DroidCon Berlin. But for example, if you are passing q DroidCon Berlin, date, let's say something you have passed in the search. So now we have two different query parameters, q and date. You can access both of them as call.request query parameters q or call.request.parameters with date. You can have two different parameters and do whatever you want to do. So this is how you can actually use this technique to create a paginated version or whatever you want to do with the query APIs. Now, this is locations and not the one which Google asks every time you open something. But this is a specific plugin which is present in the Android Ktor ecosystem. If you see the URLs here, right? how we are doing it, we are using get, and inside the quotes, we pass the parameters or the URL which we want to have. Initially, it was nothing. It was a blank one. Then we had a create user path, and now we have a search one. Sometimes we are humans, and we make mistake. And I make a lot. I have a spelling mistake habit, and I do a lot. If it wouldn't have been for Google Docs, I would have a lot of mistakes there. So if we want to be safer on that end, this is what helps us to do it. Locations actually helps us to build a type-safe path which we want to have. So it's a mechanism to create a route in a typed way by both constructing a URL and using the parameters. I'm going to show an example, and this is by default example of Ktor or definition, what I would say. So first thing, we have to install it as well, because this is not something which is present by default. Or if you don't want to install it again and again, whenever you create a Ktor project, just select in the plugin list if you want to have locations, right? You just select it there, and by default, it would be installed. So initially, this is the best way you can start off with. And then you create a data class. This is familiar for us. Data class is something we have been using every day, right? So we create a location which is marked by an annotation location which has a path in it. If you see this, does this resonate for us as the @path variable for retrofit, where we pass @path name and then the type of string, correct? Right? Yes. OK, thank you. And this is how you pass the page, right? Name and page are the variables which we are going to pass from the client side. Now, we also need to access it, correct? So this listing data class acts as a location for us. And the name and the page variable here are basically the ones we are going to pass from the client end side. And how we are going to use it is, now if you see, we are not using get and not using the quotes for passing the path. We are just using this listing as the location here. And we get the listing as in the DSL. And when now we want to respond it to the user, or we want to perform something, we just access this name via listing.name and this page via listing.page. This helps us to create a typed version, a better version of URLs. And one of the reasons we can use locations is it gives us the factor of reusability. So if we go back in the sample, I would say, we had 5 different routes: get, post, delete, and put, or maybe patch. It had the same endpoints to it, /. So if you don't want to use it again and again, just create one location and just pass it wherever you want to do it. And this is how you can use, let's say for put. You use the put verb, you pass listing there. You want to do something, do it there itself. You don't have to write it again and again. Now, we have a status page. And this is very different from what we were looking for when Facebook was down. So we are going to use this status pages for what we have in Ktor. So when we actually design something in the client end side, we have to use also something called error handling, right? That a global error mechanism where we just plug it, and it handles all the response codes for us. In retrofit, basically, we pass it on interceptors or some places, correct? In this, we have something called status pages, but it doesn't display you a page. It takes your response code, whatever it is, and whatever you want to throw. So it's basically a response to any failure state on an exception. For this as well, we have to install it. And this is the tedious process, which I don't want to do. So whenever I create a project, I select locations, I select status pages, and whatever the mandatory things are there. So we install status pages, and we use it in this way. So inside this block, you actually use the exception and pass the data classes of exceptions you have. Authentication exception and authorization exception. These are the ones I have created, but you can also have illegal exception. You can have other things as well. Now, what you do is, when you use this call.respond, you pass unauthorized or forbidden, something you want to throw. You can pass your custom text as well as an output, whichever you want to do it. Now, you just keep it like this, and whenever you call an API or something from the backend or from the client, and you get an authentication exception if there's no token, for example. This exception would be thrown, and you don't have to handle it manually, that if this is no token is present or something, this will be by default installed in your APIs or the routes. Now, this was awesome, but there are also a lot of libraries which helps us do it, or as I would say, plugins. We have a K-Mongo thing. The name suggests it's a Mongo library. It's a community-driven thing. It's a database for Ktor. But the best part about it is built on top of coroutines. So you don't have to handle everything for the threading mechanism, or you don't want it to be very heavy or work on the main thread. So coroutines helps you out there. Expose is another database. It's a Postgres wrapper by JetBrains itself. So if you want to use it, you can also use it. But it doesn't have the coroutine support. You can use JSON and Jackson for, these are also the community support thing, as a serialization and deserialization libraries for Ktor. You have Velocity and Kotlin HTML if you want to render a template in Ktor. You have inbuilt authentication mechanism if you want to use Firebase, if you want to use OAuth, or if you want to use JWT, or just a basic authentication for email number or something. You can still use it with the Ktor by inbuilt libraries. You have Swagger for documentation and multiple different ORMs. So these are the basic libraries we have for Ktor and how you can use it. OK, why is the biggest question here? Why you want to use it as an Android developer? Because sometimes we are always happy about doing JSON parsing a number of times and just building amazing applications which a lot of user uses. So a couple of reasons which came to my mind was, best one was it uses Kotlin, so no learning curve. It uses JVM libraries, whatever we had. So Android has JSON, it has JSON. It has Jackson, it has Jackson. Same things you can use. It doesn't have a learning curve, as mentioned. KMM supports it. You can also use it on the client side, Ktor. So if you know how to build maybe on the client side, you can easily navigate to the server side as well. It's very easy. And makes you a full stack developer. So sometimes if you want to build some side project, you don't have to depend or pull yourself out of that I can't use it, right? Now, to summarize everything, you can use Kotlin for anything and everything right now, and you can build your own backend. About the resources, I didn't find a lot of them. Ktor documentation is super amazing. And I have some couple of smaller projects which I have built for backends, which I have listed on my website. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.